Greetings, YouTube. My wife and I recently saw The Shape of Water, the latest film by Guillermo del Toro. Um, and this will have spoilers in it, so be aware of that and don't listen to it until you've seen the film, or unless you don't care. Um, and I knew something about this film. I didn't know a lot of the details. I didn't want to spoil it for myself, so I went in knowing only something about what was going on. And so I was prepared for some of the film's elements, but not all of them. And this is a fairy tale. This isn't a Disney-fied fairy tale. This isn't a sanitized fairy tale. This is a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. A fairy tale from out of the 16th century. Because while it does have magical realism, fantasy woven throughout it, it is also firmly based in the paranoia of the Cold War United States in the 1960s. I think specifically this is supposed to have taken place in 62. Um, and while it does have romance and even erotic aspects, it isn't sexually exploitive, but it does have some very adult themes, which is also reflective of the old school Middle Age uh, fairy tales. They were often very adult, dealing with very adult themes. And I think a lot of people weren't 100% prepared for that in some ways. The one thing I did notice that I almost think that he didn't go deep enough with some of the magical aspects of the film. And why do I say that? Because sometimes he was so good at capturing the real essence of that era that I know from my own family history and from, books and research and real history I've read, that he almost pulled you out of the fantasy aspects of what was going on. Um, so it was like almost like, oh yeah, there are fantasy aspects in this because so much of it felt just like it came out of history, even though we are in fact dealing with essentially the amphibian man from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And there is, of course, hints that this is exactly what he is because the amphibian man portrayed in the film was brought out of a South American river, which is where they find the amphibian man in The Creature from the Black Lagoon. That was intentional. Um, and our main protagonist, besides the amphibian man, is played by Sally Hawkins. And her character is mute, as is the amphibian man. Well, technically he's not mute. He makes sounds, but he doesn't have spoken language. And one of the things that Octavia Spencer brought up, she is the best friend out of Sally Hawkins' character at her place of work. I would say that her best friend outside of work would be her neighbor Giles, who is a gay artist painter. But the character of Zelda, played by Octavia Spencer, made a very cogent comment. She says, because both of the main characters of this film are mute, that the people with the most dialogue out of the protagonists are Giles and Zelda, a black woman and a gay man, who, in the 1960s, would have been silenced as far as filmmaking was concerned. So Del Toro has done an excellent job of allowing these voices to be heard in a way they would have never been heard from a film made in that era. So kudos on you. He has an excellent grasp of that whole era of the Cold War and the espionage and the spy and the counter spy and the serious nature of it, but also you would be stunned by how bumblingly amateurish so much of real world espionage was from that era, as it is now. There are aspects of espionage. You think it's James Bond, it's not James Bond. It isn't. It's sometimes you look at this and go, if I were to put this into a script, no one would film it because they would think it was too dumb. But that's how espionage works in the real world sometimes. It was incredibly amateurish and poorly executed and depended so much on people just being stupid. But it happened a lot. And this film does an excellent job of bringing that to the fore. Um, I have to tell you that the visuals in this are just wonderful. Um, Doug Jones, who plays the Amphibian Man, is just wonderful. Put up with 6 hours of costuming, and he commented that it was better than some of the things he's worn for Del Toro in the past, which I guess is a testament to the technology improvements that we are currently experiencing in filmmaking and costuming. Um, and a lot of these effects are practical. And I guess they only spent like $20 million on this film. And what they got for their buck is amazing. It really does look good. Um, the secret, a government base where this whole thing takes place is cool. The apartments are cool. I would love to know how much the rent on those apartments would cost today because they're just wonderfully large and uh, quirky, and they're just really cool looking, even though they are above a movie theater. And the costuming, along with the lighting and such, and the music, it set it very firmly in that era, but it almost gave it a timeless feel because you almost got like this could be anywhere between 1949 and 1969. It's like this 20-year gap it could have fallen into in some ways, and that kind of gives it that timeless feeling, which is good because you want a film to have legs and you want it to have maybe not be set so firm in one time period, so it'll be more accessible by more people, I should say. Um, and one of the things I didn't know about, I knew there were erotic elements in this film. One thing I didn't know about is that there was so much direct nudity, because you're like 3 minutes into this film and, well, there's Sally Hawkins naked. Don't get me wrong, lovely woman, very attractive, but I wasn't aware that it was going to happen so quickly. One thing this film did is that overt female masturbation, something we do not see in films. It is almost always a forbidden topic, and it's right here. She has a schedule. She gets up, she bathes, she masturbates, she eats, makes dinner, makes her food for work, and goes and works the third shift at some secret base, or intelligence agency base where they clean. That's what she does. She cleans. And one of the things that the base is to studying is the Amphibian Man, who she makes contact with because she treats the amphibian like a being and not a thing. Not to mention, she teaches it how to communicate. Now, these researchers are not good because it never seems to have occurred to anyone to use sign language or even use visual cues like this is A, B, C. Just simple. You could have done a point chart for this thing and given it symbols, just pictograms and things like that. There are other ways of communicating with someone other than speech because this creature cannot form that speech. One of the things they did comment is that it had a very complex breathing apparatus, which allowed it to breathe both air and water, which is why maybe it couldn't speak, because the apparatus that we use for speaking would be heavily occupied by its complex breathing apparatus. Reason humans can't breathe and drink at the same time, and many animals can. For example, our primate cousins, they can do so because we have adapted those aspects to speech, which is why we cannot breathe and drink at the same time. Maybe that's why this creature cannot speak and speak at all, because it's got this very complex breathing structure inside its body, which would preclude the use of a larynx because it doesn't have one. And another last nice thing about this is that the monster is a person. The bad guy in this is a human being, which is also nice. Now, Del Toro leaves enough hints in the film, and you begin to get this idea that the monster in the film is going to rape our main character. He's laying down the breadcrumbs, and I am dreading this. But what happens, and this is beautiful, what happens is Del Toro gives us 2 touches. The first one of the touches is the monster touching um, Sally Hawkins' character of Elisa, and she recoils. And the second touch is when the amphibian man touches her in a gesture of intimacy, of erotic contact with clothing. There's nothing, it's utterly innocent. But it's the first time anyone's ever touched her like that. And she's shocked and she steps away, doesn't recoil. She's overwhelmed. Then she goes back. Now, some people will tell you that this film is about fish sex. It's not about fish sex. If someone, kinky fish sex, I think someone quoted to me, if your definition of kinky fish sex is two people embracing each other while they're naked, or amphibian man's always naked, then you have a very sad fantasy life. There is erotic aspects. There is no overt sex in this. At least not between the amphibian and between Sally Hawkins' character of Elisa. There is actually one sex scene in the film between two people, and it is incredibly unerotic because it involves the monster. I can't really recommend this film enough. This is a beautiful film. It was well executed. It was attractive. The soundtrack supported it. The love story was wonderful. The magical elements were great. And I'd like to say, as an older dude, the main character of one of the main characters, Giles, who is the gay painter, you don't actually know how old he is. He passes himself off as in his 50s. The actor is far older than that, but even if he is the age he says in this, 57, it's nice to see a person in their 50s given a chance to be heroic and not just be seen as an obstacle or someone that's incapable of having agency. So that kind of choked me up a bit, that Del Toro gave Giles that moment in the sun where he could be a hero. That was a nice touch. So yeah, go see A Shape of Water. I was distressed to see that this film was not getting a play on like some of the megaplexes. I had to go to the Red River Theater in Concord, New Hampshire to get a chance to see this film. So it's playing in smaller art house type theaters. Red River is a non-profit film theater in series. There's more than one, which is a theater chain. So it's just not going to get to play. Also, it's an adult fairy tale. It's R-rated. It has violence and sex and nudity. So it's also not going to get as much play as a lot of other films. But it needs it. Lots of people need to see this movie because it's good. Del Toro did an incredible job. And I am really hoping that the Blu-ray has a commentary track because I would love to hear what Del Toro has to say. Again, go forth, see this film. You will not regret it.